In this section, we're going to look at agricultural policy and food aid to those who don't have food. Probably one of the most unnerving aspects of farming is the uncertainty of it. I came from a rural area. Many of my family members are farmers, and from personal experience, I know that they never know from one year to the next whether it's going to be a good season, bad season. It's a rainy spring, it's a dry spring, it's a hot summer, it's a cool summer and rainy. Um, Animals that get sick for no reason, things like that. There are a lot of uncertainties. What's the price of milk going to be? What's the price of corn going to be? And the farmer really has little to no control over most of these things. They can't certainly control the weather. You can't control, as a small farmer, you can't control what crop prices are going to be, what pests there might be. You can do that with pesticides or so on. But when you do have to take out loans, what's the interest rate? What's the global need for the food if you're a larger scale farm? There's actually just a lot of uncertainty. You never know what could happen in farming. A couple things that the government has tried to do, and governments worldwide have tried to do to alleviate this uncertainty and to help people actually stay in farming, and it actually has helped agribusiness as well, is to control prices. And this is by putting a legally mandated limit on the prices, and that maybe keeps prices artificially low. So in that sense, the consumers are happy, but the farmers are unhappy. And I know that happens a lot with my cousin. She runs a dairy farm. The price of milk that she gets for a gallon of milk, very low compared to what you would think of her costs when to produce that milk. So she gets a certain amount, and I said the consumers are happy because they don't want to pay more than $3-4 for a gallon of milk, but it costs her a lot more than that to actually produce it. One way to then make the farmers happy is to provide subsidies where they are given support, tax breaks. Those can take a number of forms, whether it might be tax breaks on their income, it could be tax breaks on property taxes, other financial support, subsidies, etc. And globally, this accounts for a third of farm income. Subsidies over the years, though, have become more and more controversial. In New Zealand and a lot of Brazil, they have basically eliminated all subsidies to farmers, and it has actually been a pretty good benefit. Surprisingly, a lot of people were very concerned about what would happen here, particularly the farmers themselves. And they did this by promoting more sustainable agricultural practices to say, what can you do on your farm to make it more sustainable so that it is profitable for you, good for the environment, and better all around. Prices went up in some instances they went down. So it could vary depending on what the crop is, depending on what the industry might be and the need for that in a global marketplace. The fishing system, talking about just how that is also an industry. They're given subsidies. One of the subsidies that are given for fishing includes a technique called bottom trawling, which is actually just having a big net that goes across the bottom part of the ocean floor. Very, very destructive to an ecosystem because it just disturbs anything that's resting on the bottom, whether it's the fish that they want or not. But that's given a subsidy. The Farm Bill is actually a collection of bills that was first started during the Depression in 1933 that kind of paid farmers to actually not grow crops. So this was really kind of the first time that had ever occurred, and also to guarantee to buy crops from the government so that the government could then have a surplus. This was actually more enforced actually during, as we approached World War II. We wanted to make sure we were going to be an independent country and didn't have to rely on foreign imports, etc. And it also included a branch of that first farm bill known as the Agricultural Adjustment Act, also had a nutrition program in it as well. This was the first time there was actually a bill like this to help out the traditional farm. This was updated in 1938, and with that new legislation, it required that the Farm Bill, and it has gone through multiple names throughout the years, so it's really never called, actually, the real name of it is not the Farm Bill, but that's what everyone refers to it as. It has been updated regularly since then. Over the last few years. It was set to be updated 2 years ago, and our Congress had just couldn't make any agreement on anything related to the Farm Bill. Different aspects have been added over the years to include energy, and there's actually 15 different areas that are included in the current version of the Farm Bill. And we're going to be taking some time in class this week to actually discuss the most recent passage of the Farm Bill, which was just the Farm Bill of 2014, which was actually 2 years delayed from when it should have been enacted. They just kept extending the previous one and allowing it to change. But this year's Farm Bill does have some significant updates to it, and it's important enough. I think we're going to spend some time talking about it in class. Food aid is usually developed countries helping out those undeveloped countries or developing countries, or in other parts of even just one country or not. Some of the problems with food aid, it is not considered a permanent solution, and this is one area where there's a lot of political differences. Should we help those countries in need, or should we not? Shouldn't we just help our own people? Things like that. Some people say it actually helps populations grow when they really don't have the food and the resources to support a growing population, so we should kind of let them fend for themselves. It makes one country dependent on another. It makes their country produce less, and it actually drives prices down by flooding the market with some cheap imports. Some of the newer trends in food aid is to help the poor help themselves. There's more and more impact all over the world of smaller farmers and buying locally and that sort of thing. We'll talk about that. We talk about alternative farming methods. But the focus is really on the needs of the children. How can we help the children to reduce death and disease? That's always what kind of tugs more at the heartstrings than others. Another growing trend, and we see this even in the Pittsburgh area, is the use of community gardens in which people can share one garden, help each other. You can have a community garden that might actually provide food for a food bank. You can have other places where you can rent a small plot of land. They actually have that over at Boyce Mayview Park, where you can have a little plot of land over there where you can grow your own tomatoes and so forth. But all of these are some new trends in food aid. Alternative food sources can be quite a variety of things. Quite a variety of things. There are definitely new food varieties. Crossbreeding is a process that's been going on for a long time. You can think back to your freshman biology and talking about Mendel's peas and how he crossbreeded those, and you got an introduction to genetics at that time. But over the last 20 years or so, there's been a gene revolution. So we've had the green revolution, the blue revolution, and now the gene revolution, where we use genetic engineering. Here we actually change the DNA by adding, deleting, splicing things together to get the traits that we want. Anytime you actually alter the DNA, it's known as a genetically modified organism, or a GMO. And oftentimes those are categorized two different ways. One is maybe called HT, which is an herbicide tolerant. That means that a product like Roundup, that is a weed killer, that it would be tolerant to that weed killer. And that way all the weeds around that plant would die, but that plant itself would survive. Another one is referred to as BT, which is pest resistant. You may be wondering where the B comes from. It's actually like a bacteria name from the soil that they actually use, but it's a pest resistant material. There has definitely been a rapid increase in genetically modified organisms since 1996. Here's a chart from the U.S. Department of Agriculture where you can see just from 1996 to the year 2012 the number and varieties and traits of genetically engineered crops in the U.S. and it's just grown exponentially. The amount of soybeans, as we saw in the video the other day, Food Inc., 93% of all the soybeans planted are genetically modified to be that herbicide resistant, to have them so that you could put a weed killer on, but the soybeans themselves still grow. Similar with cotton, it's an herbicide resistant, but there's another variety of cotton that's a pesticide resistant, and then herbicide and pesticide resistant corn. All of these are dramatic changes. You can see where in 96 there was literally 0%, very, very small amount of this, and now we're at 70, 80, 90% of genetically engineered crops. Some of the advantages of these GMOs are that it is definitely a sustainable way to solve the world's hunger problems. If you can eliminate the pests, etc., that will feed more people. Some people think it can improve human health because if you're feeding them better, that will prevent disease. It definitely makes more profits for the businesses and the farms that grow these crops, and it does use less application of fertilizer and less application of pesticides because it is a trait of that plant instead of having to apply an additional pesticide. Disease resistant and reduces energy needs. The main concern most people have with GMOs is it's unpredictable. They've only been around since 1996. Is it increasing pesticide and herbicide resistance? If this is a trait that's carried on, is that then going to make more plants as they crossbreed more resistant to pesticides? And will we have to make stronger and more powerful pesticides and herbicides to kill other things that we're trying to get rid of? Another thing that we mentioned in the Food Inc. video was it disrupts the seed market. Companies own a patent to this genetically modified plant, corn, soybeans, cotton, whatever it might be. Before farmers just harvested their own seeds from the crop from the year before. It's definitely lowered the genetic diversity. 93% of our crops of our soybeans are genetically modified. What happened to what's the other 7%, and what happened to the 93% that used to be a variety of different soybean crops or varieties? There really is not much of an increase in the crop yield, and that's another concern that we have for this in general.